Good evening, and welcome to Texas Children's Cancer Center's Legend event. What a great evening this is going to be tonight as we honor another phenomenal legend that's benefiting the Texas Children's Cancer Center. I'm Mark Wallace, President and CEO of Texas Children's Hospital. We have a phenomenal program in store for you tonight. Thank you for being with us. Tonight, we have as our honoree and special guest, the head coach of the University of Alabama football program, Coach Nick Saban. Everyone knows Coach Saban, one of the winningest coaches, one of the best coaches in the history of college football. Coach Saban has been at Alabama now for 14 seasons, all successful, and in total, he's won 6 national championships and been voted Coach of the Year 8 times. Coach Saban, that's just remarkable. So Coach Saban, we know him as a phenomenal college football coach, but he's also a great person with a very high empathy quotient for his players and his team, his fans, and the university. He's a great leader. So Coach Saban, we're really honored to have you with us tonight at the Texas Children's Cancer Center. Interviewing Coach Saban tonight is going to be one of the very best in all of sports media, and that's Chris Fowler of ABC and ESPN. Chris, thanks for being here with us tonight to interview Coach Saban. I also want to recognize our director of our fabulous Cancer Center, Dr. Susan Blaney. Dr. Blaney, thank you for your leadership at the Cancer Center. I want to also acknowledge all of the employees and medical staff that work in our wonderful Cancer Center with you. And also to Kathy Zay and Julie Bergen, our co-event chairs. You've done just a remarkable job tonight in some really difficult and challenging circumstances, but you've overcome those and you're putting on a great program. Julie and Kathy, great job. Thank you so very much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the region president for Wells Fargo, Daryl Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. It's a true pleasure to represent Wells Fargo this evening. Tonight is a special night. Tonight marks the 13th year that Wells Fargo has partnered with Texas Children's Hospital to bring you an evening with a legend. We're proud to support Texas Children's Hospital because it's an organization that is working hard to strengthen our communities, starting with our children. I do want to take a moment to say thank you to the men and women who work at the hospital. The amazing dedication of the staff at the hospital is what makes it a special place. As a company grounded in the communities we serve, it's a great honor to give back to an institution like Texas Children's Hospital, a hospital that is addressing the vital healthcare needs and issues, not only for Houstonians, but families across the country. At this time, I would like to introduce someone who's dedicated her entire life to children's healthcare. She is the Elise Young Chair of Pediatric Oncology at Baylor's College of Medicine. She is also the director of Texas Children Cancer and Hematology Center at Texas Children's Hospital. Please welcome Dr. Susan Blaney.
Good evening. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for an evening with a legend. Your support of Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Centers means so much to us. I would first like to take a moment to recognize this year's honorary chairs, Cindy and Robert Blevins and Christy and George Lindahl. We are so honored to have you join us this evening. Your dedication to our communities in Houston and the Woodlands is truly inspirational. Another very, very special thank you goes to our incredible event chairs, Julie Bergen and Kathy Zay. They have worked tirelessly to make this event a reality. Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Centers is one of the largest pediatric cancer and hematology programs in the United States. We provide medical treatment for children and adolescents with all types of cancer and blood disorders. Our nationally acclaimed clinical and psychosocial care, along with our research, drug development, and professional education programs, are considered by U.S. News and World Report to be one of the best children's programs in the country. Our nearly 200 nationally and internationally recognized physicians, in partnership with our team of 1,000 highly specialized staff, have pioneered many of the now standard protocols for treating and curing pediatric cancer and blood disorders. In addition, at Texas Children's Hospital, we have a full range of pediatric subspecialty care available in-house 24 hours a day. At Texas Children's, we treat all pediatric cancer and blood disorders, even the rarest of the rare. The children and adolescents that we treat come from 50 states and 56 countries. Each year, we see more than 4,200 new patients and aim to provide the most family-centered advanced care possible. Every day, we see an average of 130 children in the hospital and another 135 in our outpatient clinics. In addition, we perform 120 bone marrow transplants annually. We know that a diagnosis of cancer or a serious blood disorder is traumatic and life-altering for both the child and the family. As a leader in family-centered care, Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Centers provides personalized, comprehensive care that addresses both the physical and emotional needs of the patient and their family. Research is directly responsible for the tremendous strides in the field of pediatric hematology and oncology over the past several decades. Today, I'm happy to say that nearly 80% of children diagnosed with cancer survive. However, that unfortunately means that 20% of children diagnosed with cancer do not survive, and that is unacceptable. At Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Centers, our physician scientists and researchers are working around the clock to improve cure rates for life-threatening cancer and blood disorders of childhood that we see every day. We eagerly look forward to the day, which we hope is in the not too distant future, that we can tell each and every child or adolescent who enters our door that we have a cure for their disease. Again, thank you for tuning in and helping us celebrate an evening with a legend. I hope you enjoy this evening's interview with the 2020 Texas Children's legend, Coach Nick Saban, interviewed by Chris Fowler.
Hello, everybody. And hi, Nick. Good to spend some time with you. Folks, we're going to have a fun session here. We're going to get some stories from Coach Saban, some wisdom. I think you'll gain a deeper understanding about why he's been so successful, maybe see a side of him that you don't often see. But Nick, I know we both want to start by saluting the work done by Texas Children's Hospital, their unique method of operation, the care they take for the patient and their families is just extraordinary.
Well, and you know, I'm really excited about being in the first ever video fundraiser, maybe in history, for you and I to do this. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank and tell all the donors, doctors, nurses, staff at Texas Children's Hospital how much we appreciate what they do in their fight against, you know, children's cancer and the work that they do every day. And hopefully they're being able to do this work in a way where they can stay safe in this time of this COVID-19 virus.
We both found Houston to be an extraordinary city. It's got a big heart. It's got a strong backbone, very resilient in tough times, and very generous, very philanthropic. And the times I've been there, I really appreciate that. So please keep up the good work, folks. Nick, people always want to know what makes Alabama successful year after year. And I always say, how much time do you have? Because there's a lot that goes into it. And we'll get into the discipline and the character and the lessons that you teach the players. But we talked about kids. I want to talk about a time when your players get to act like big kids, and we see a different side of you when they're invited up to the lake, where you have a house for their baptism when they come into the program, and they are tested. Their fortitude is tested in certain ways. So take the folks through those experiences to the lake when the new Alabama players come into the program.
Well, I think, one of the things that I really like to do in developing relationships with players, getting to know them. So hopefully we could teach them and coach them better. But I think they have an appreciation for you when they see you in a different light other than just being the coach and somebody that's demanding that they do things a certain way. So creating these opportunities to have them in an informal situation where everybody's having fun, whether it's riding a tube, swimming, or whatever, is really kind of fun for them. And I guess, the most memorable moment of all is I had a brand new boat, never, ever been in the boat before. And we go out in the boat and I'm pulling guys and the boat just stops. I mean, this is a big time boat too. And everybody in the world thinks we ran out of gas. But the fuel pump went out. All right. So the players are busting my chops like you can't believe for not putting gas in the boat or not being able to afford to put gas in the boat, which is even better. All right. And then we come to find out that it goes out on the internet. So if somebody puts it out, on Twitter that Coach Saban ran out of gas. So I got about 50 of those little red gas cans if anybody needs one. People from all over Alabama sent me little red gas cans to put gas in my boat with. So that was one of the funniest stories. But things like that happen all the time. And it's great to see players interact, with themselves, develops relationships on your team, as well as it gives me an opportunity to be in a sort of different kind of moment with them. That's a lot of fun.
I'm told, though, by some of these players, these aren't pleasure cruises on the inner tube behind your boat. You're out there swerving and weaving and trying to throw them out of the inner tube into the lake. And then they got to take this plunge, right? You make them jump, what is it, about 20 feet off the dock into the lake. And some of these big, tough guys are less than enthusiastic about that.
Yeah, no question. But I think there's only one guy. That was Big Cody, who used to play nose guard for us, who weighed about 400 pounds. And he was a very good athlete, and he'd get hunkered down on the tube. And, the whole idea of the tube is you create waves where you get them to go up in the air and then they blow up, I could never get him off that tube, man. He's the champ of all champs.
And they couldn't get him off his spot when they tried to block him either. So that fits. Another big part of the program is the competitiveness. Obviously, we see that on the practice field with the players. It's legendary at Alabama. I'm told, though, that the coaching staff gets pretty competitive, and maybe you know where I'm going with this. These legendary pickup basketball games involving the staff, where you are the commissioner, the coach, the referee, and the team captain and all these things. And it's you get a bunch of alpha coaches involved in the basketball court, and I guess that gets pretty heated too.
Well, it can, but I try to keep it calm. Being the commissioner, as well as the personnel director, I always pick the best players to be on my team. I even pick the guy who guards me on the other team. You call the
fouls too, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. So our team is pretty successful, and it's unusual when we don't have success, and nobody wants to make me mad. So I don't know if they're letting us win or if we're just that competitive.
I've even heard, maybe Kirby Smart told me, that there's even been a mid-game trade. When somebody on the other team starts playing too well, they might somehow end up on your team. So that's quite a wrinkle.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, you can trade during the season. You ought to be able to trade during the game. But I will say this, Kirby and Jimbo, those two guys, Jimbo Fisher and Kirby, they were always on my team. Those guys are good players.
A more serious part of the team building, what has been called the mental architecture of a team. And a lot goes into this, but your teams have been known for being able to adapt and react and have players that take it upon themselves to know what to do and kind of coach each other with peer pressure. What's the most important thing that folks need to know about creating that mental architecture where they're adaptable and resilient and tough-minded?
Well, I think, a couple things. I mean, first of all, everybody says football is a great team game. And it is, but I think it's also an individual game. I think the individuals on the team make the team what it is. It's just each individual is dependent on the other to do their job because you got 11 guys out there at once. All right, so everybody needs to understand that. But I also think that working on the individuals is absolutely important in terms of setting goals, that they set goals for themselves. They understand what they have to do to accomplish those goals. And probably most importantly, and the thing that's most difficult, is having the discipline to execute it every day. And this is where people struggle with, whether they're on a diet or whether they're trying to accomplish something, is, can you do all the things that you need to do every day? Can you do the right things and not do the wrong things? We ask ourselves probably 100 times a day, here's something I know I'm supposed to do that I really don't want to do. Can you make yourself do it? Over here, there's something you're not supposed to do, but you want to do it. Can you keep yourself from it? Well, if you can make those choices and decisions, you're always going to have a better chance to stay on the path of doing the things you need to do to accomplish the goals that you have. So that's something that you want to try to establish individually. When Kobe Bryant was here, his whole message was, how do I have to edit my behavior to accomplish the goals that they have? Well, I think one of the things that you have to conquer in being able to do that is feeling versus choice. You're going to do what you feel like doing, or you're going to choose to do the things you need to do to accomplish the goals that you have. So I think that's really important. But from a team standpoint, creating a culture of accountability with your team starts with individuals personally being accountable to do what they're supposed to do the right thing, the right way, the right time, all the time. Academics, being accountable in academics in terms of setting up a program and a plan, and you can make the choices and decisions to execute the plan. And then you have to do it on the football field as well. And all these things take discipline. All right, but you don't learn discipline on the field, just like you don't develop strength on the field. You develop strength in the weight room and you take it to the field. You develop discipline at 8 o'clock in the morning when you're making choices and decisions about how you're going to go about your day, and then you take that to the field. So this culture of accountability, I think, is something that we try to create with the players, and we've fortunately had enough success around here and had enough successful players that have bought into this, that they've set a great example for the next group of players. Like if Julio Jones came here tomorrow, and he was watching 7-on-7, and he saw a player out there not going about it the way he was taught to do it, he would just walk up to the guy and say, that's not how we do it here. Mm-hmm. All right. So you develop that kind of culture, which I think transcends through the next generation, and that helps you permeate success in your organization. And I think that's something that we've been able to do here, and it's been very beneficial for us.
I know a lot of the lessons you're talking about, the discipline part, came from watching your dad. He was a very tough-minded coach. You're growing up in West Virginia. Some of the stories you've shared about his legendary toughness, where the practices would extend after dark, and then guys would have to run, and you'd have to prove it to Coach Saban that you had completed your mission. Tell the story about the challenges that you were put through as a young player and able to learn some of those lessons when you eventually became a coach you could apply.
Well, I think the one thing that I learned was work ethic. Even though we were Pop Warner guys, 10 to 14 years old, he really made us learn work ethic, perseverance, how to overcome adversity, pride in performance. A lot of the values that are important in being successful at anything. And we were just young kids, but he demanded that we do things at a certain standard. And even when we do conditioning after practice, the hill we had to run up was like, I don't know, however many degrees this is. And it was a pretty lengthy hill. And there was trees at the top, and you had to grab a leaf and bring it down to prove that you were at the top because it was dark and nobody could see. And, but I learned a lot, from those experiences. And I think it was really reflective. And we all lived in coal mining towns. Most of the kids never participated in sports because they couldn't get back and forth to school because of where they lived. And he bought a school bus and went and picked them up. And how many of those guys that played for him and learned that, at that early age, because of the mental toughness and discipline that he demanded in all of us, helped them be successful in their life. He had 3 guys from my age that went on to West Virginia University and made All-American as football players and graduated from college, and none of them would have probably even ever played. All right, so a lot of lessons to be learned in athletics, and that's why I think coaching is such a great profession. Is we have an opportunity because most of the participants really enjoy and love what they do. So there's an opportunity to get them to, because they want to play, to get them to do other things that are important to the success in their life, to do those things correctly so they can play. And I think that's one of the things that my dad was pretty good at.
What was the moment when you first realized that football was going to be a driving force in your life?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I love playing. From the time I was 9 years old, I don't tell this story very much, but my grandma Saban, God rest her soul, she made everybody learn how to play accordion and when we were growing up. And I was the only boy. I had a sister and I had all aunts, so everybody had to play the accordion. So I learned when I was 9 years old, the only way I could get out of practicing that accordion was to play sports. If I was playing basketball or baseball or anything, she never made me practice. All right, I could get out of practice in accordion. So that's why I played everything. That's how it all got started. All right, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And but I never really wanted to be a coach. I liked to play. I never ever sort of equated being involved in the game from the other perspective of being the teacher and the coach. So I never really, had any thought of being a coach. And, Don James, who was my college coach after we played in Tangerine Bowl in 1972, I think it was, called me in his office right after Christmas when we came back to school. And he said, I want you to be a graduate assistant. And I said, why would I be a graduate assistant? I don't want to go to graduate school and I don't want to be a coach. And he said, well, your wife's got another year of school. Miss Terry had another year of school. She was a year behind me. We were married. He said, you can't go anywhere. You can't take a job. You're going to have to stay here. So why don't you stay here while she finishes? So that's the only reason I did it, to be honest with you. But I absolutely loved it. I liked it just as much as when I played. You were still involved in the competition, just from a different perspective, from a planning, from a teaching, seeing the way you taught guys do things, go out and execute it and create value for themselves on the field. So I absolutely loved it, but kind of an amazing way that it sort of happened for me. And then I always wanted to go to, I think it was called the Norwood Institute. It was to be a general manager for General Motors, and their company and their car dealerships. All right. So after about 40 years of coaching, we ended up getting a couple car dealerships, through Mercedes or whatever. So instead of starting where I wanted to, I kind of finished that way. So it's kind of interesting the way it all happened.
That's a great story. I guess, thank goodness for an accordion, for Don James and Miss Terry, all those three things combining to get you where you are now. I want to talk about some of the things you have to do within your job, which is take a calculated risk, do something that would not be considered by a lot of people to be in your character. And you've had some notable moments where in big situations, you calculate the risk reward and decide to do something that is a gamble, really. Whether it's the onside kick in that game against Clemson, which paid off. How do you, on the spot, or is it on the spot? Is it all done ahead of time? Figure out, hey, this is the time to take a gamble and really roll the dice.
Well, I think calculated is the right word, or is the word that probably I would try to make sure that everybody understood. Take an example of the onside kick against Clemson. The way they lined up against our formation when we were kicking off, we really had a little leverage, over on the right side. And our kicker was fantastic at kicking this kick. And Marlon Humphrey was very fast and, had great ball skills, was really good at, getting out there to get it. So, the play was there if we could just execute it, just like any other play. And people say it was a tremendous gamble. But if we wouldn't have got it, Clemson would have got the ball on the 45-yard line. If we'd have kicked off to them normally, they'd have probably got it at about the 25. So it was a 20-yard gamble. And the way the game was going, we're a no huddle fast offense and a very talented team. So we weren't stopping them. All right. So we finally got ahead in the game. And I'm saying if we don't get 2 scores ahead in this game, it's going to go back and forth, and whoever has the ball last is going to win, kind of like a basketball game. So I said, this is an opportunity. Nobody expects it at this time in the game for us to take advantage of what was a calculated risk based on what we saw in their alignment and what we thought we could execute. And the players went out and executed it perfectly. But this is like a lot of calls in coaching. When it works, it's a great call. If that wouldn't have worked, it would have been the dumbest thing that any coach ever tried in the history of ball. So, the players make you look good sometimes, and they certainly made us look good on that one.
I think it's important for folks to know that these things don't happen by accident, though. Preparation. I remember being at the closed door practice, the previous game to that, when I think you're playing Michigan State, and you kept practicing this pooch onside kick again and again. And I turned to Kirk Herbstreit and say, nobody in the world thinks this game's going to come down to an onside kick. What are they working on this, so much for? And then it wasn't needed in that game because you clobbered him, but it was needed in the next game. I think that's what's interesting is that these things don't just happen on the spot. It's preparing for them. It's having a team ready to execute it. So is there a championship moment, whether a championship at any level or any sort of championship that for you stands out above the other ones, Nick?
Well, I think, all the championships are, really special because I think when you win a championship, it's an unusual thing. When you get a whole group of people that sort of buy into the principles and values, the standards, they work together, you got the team chemistry, and they successfully, persevere the season, climb the mountain, whatever you want to talk about, to end up being the best team in the country. I don't think, but I think the one thing that happened that was probably the most unique change of events, in a game, from utterly just absolutely out of your mind, upset with the player making a mistake, and then turning around on the next play and making a fantastic play that, won a championship, was the events of the end of the Georgia game in overtime when, Tua being a freshman, Georgia got the ball first, they kicked the field goal. So we were at least going to stay in the game if we could kick a field goal. He takes a sack on the first play of the game and loses 12 yards. And now the ball's on the 37-yard line. Now we're out of field goal range. So now we got to do something. And on the very next play, he throws a, touchdown pass that wins the game. So going from just wanting to, go out there and, shake the quarterback, how could you do this, to, wow, what a great play. I mean, in a matter of 30 seconds.
The season's over. The season ended right on that moment, which is what made it so crazy. I remember saying in the call, Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. And by that time, the ball was in the air. And 2 seconds later, he had made up for it. You guys were champions. I remember the look on your face. I guess it's pretty sweet when, as you say, glory comes from despair that quick. It can happen in football, though, right?
Well, and I think what an interesting, sort of antidote to all that was, so then we're in the locker room, everybody's jumping up and down, singing the fight song and all that. And then I always go around and shake hands with every player, ask them if they're okay, tell them they play a good game or whatever. So when I get to Tua, I said, good game, man, did a great job, but got to learn one lesson. You can't take sacks in the red area. And he looked at me and he said, Coach, we just needed more room to throw the ball.
That's a pretty good answer. You can say that when it works out, though, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, just like the onside kick.
A lot more victories than losses for you, obviously. But I've heard many athletes and coaches say that you learn powerful lessons from losses. Is there one that stings worse, that sticks out in the career that you felt like, hey, man, that was super painful, but I did learn something from that I haven't forgotten?
Well, if you're talking about championship games, I think, I always use the phrase, don't waste a failing. I think what, maybe we all sort of have a tendency to do is when we don't have success, we get a little frustrated. But sometimes when you don't have the success, that's the best time to sit down and say, what could I have done better? What could I have learned from this experience? And how will that benefit me in the future? And I think that was the message that I gave the players when we lost on the last play of the game to Clemson, in the championship game a couple of years ago. We had gone ahead in the game with about 2 minutes to go, and they went 2 minutes, and it was a tremendous 2-minute drive by them. They made some fantastic plays. They made some great catches when we had good coverage on people, and they executed to a T, and we needed to make a play and never could make one. But that was the message that I gave the team after that. Don't waste this failing. This does not define who you are. One game doesn't define who you are. One play doesn't define who you are. But there are things that we can all learn and grow from in our life as well as in football from this experience. So that's probably the one that sticks with me the most.
I'm going to stop, and now we'll do the what if scenarios, because that plays pretty well into the challenges of having to adapt. So I'll ask this question as though the season is going to happen on time. Okay, so it's been a strange off season, but now we're getting ready to play football. Not soon after, or pretty soon after, I should say, this airs. Nick, it's a real test of a team's ability to adapt and think on the fly. This has been a very strange offseason. Everything in America has been transformed by COVID-19. Now, without spring football, with a very unusual and disrupted summer preparation, what are the most important lessons to getting a team ready to adapt to these odd circumstances and not use anything as an excuse, but be prepared?
But I think it goes right back to the experience itself. I mean, how do you manage adverse circumstances? That's very, very critical, I think, to being successful. And, the way we told our players is, look, when we were going through all this, everybody was at home, had to work out on their own, had to do academics online. Everybody needs to keep doing the right stuff and don't do the wrong stuff. And this will be more challenging than any time because there's nobody there to really look over your shoulder. Are you doing your work on time in school? Are you working out like you're supposed to work out? Are you lifting weights like you're supposed to? Are you doing simulated training so you're going to improve? Because we're going to come out of this better at the other end if we can manage this better than all the other teams. And it goes right back to, look, we've had the best success at Alabama when we have what I call no blinking lights. And when you look at Christmas tree and all lights shine bright, it's beautiful. But if you get one light that's flickering, all your attention goes to that light, and that's all you see. So if we have any individual on the team that's not managing this correctly, it will affect us when we come back. And so it's all about the individuals, and it's all about, football is an individual sport to some degree that's interdependent on other individuals to do their job. So everybody has to do their job now because you're all going to be individually separated. And if we can do that, we'll come out of this better at the other end, and we'll have a better opportunity to be successful when we do play. So I think that's the key. What is your mindset? Positive mindset of being able to manage the circumstance that you're in and come out of it better at the other end, maybe than somebody else managed it.
Military training uses the concept of adversity tolerance. How much can you tolerate? Can you still thrive when things get tough? I know those are principles you also use, and adversity clearly comes in many different forms. Is this one more example of that where you hope that their adversity tolerance is the best in the country?
Well, it has to be. I mean, that's what you're striving for. But I think people and players, really need to understand there can be no great victories in life unless there's tremendous adversity, because that adversity is really what makes it a great victory. I mean, what made the war in the Pacific the greatest military victory of all time? Pearl Harbor. So if that circumstance didn't occur, maybe we wouldn't be talking about that as being the greatest military victory of all time because of the adversity that had to be overcome now to win. All right. So, and I think that's probably true in life in a lot of ways. And I think this sort of pandemic that we all had to go through, was an opportunity for a lot of folks to do that. And the people that can take advantage of it will probably end up being more successful in the long run.
Okay, now I'm going to do scenario 2. Let's say they're not ready to play ball in the fall. It's a season that shifts to early 21. Nick, this will be a football season ahead that is unlike any other, being played at a very unconventional time of year, which means the players have had a lot of time since they've been on the field. What are the most important things to adapt and be ready when eventually it's time to turn on the lights and play games for real?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to take into consideration all the time that the players weren't practicing, that they weren't under the supervision of coaches even to work out, whether they were strength coaches or, their actual position coach. So I think the number one thing is player safety. Are we doing this in a timely fashion where we know the players are healthy and they have enough time to be able to get themselves back in playing shape? So we're not going to have a lot of misfortune when it comes to injuries and things like that, when we do start playing football again. So I think that would be my number one concern, regardless of the timetable. But I do think it's really, really important that we try to play football at some point in time. For college, because, this goes back to the business part of it, most of the revenue created in most colleges, comes from football and football season, which is what allows all the other sports to have the opportunity to compete and to play, and for players, student athletes to be on scholarship, have a chance to get an education, compete at a high level. So if we don't have football season, it's really going to upset, the whole balance of college athletics, across the board. So we're looking forward to being able to play whenever they say we can play.
We talked about messaging and motivation for players, and I've talked to other coaches about this, and one of the great sources of pride they have and what they consider a calling, not a job, is that they leave pieces of themselves with their players when the player departs the program. What piece of yourself do you hope that your players will take with them and use after their careers at Alabama are done?
Well, first of all, I'm hopeful that I was a good leader, that we set a good example, that we could be somebody that our players could emulate, and that would help them have a better chance to have success in their life. I hope that we taught them that they should all really care enough about other people to want to help them for their benefit. And that kind of compassion would be something that could benefit, them being a better parent, a better husband, a better person, in the future. And our number one goal here, and my number one goal has always been for players, is because they were involved in your program, they have a better chance to be successful in life. And that's the thing that I would pride myself most in, if we were successful in doing that with a significant number of our players, because that is really what we try to do. And it really doesn't have anything to do with winning games. And it doesn't really have anything to do with winning a championship, but it has a lot to do with what kind of people, come out of your program because of the principles and values that you teach, and what they buy into and how that impacts their future.
Well, the wins and the championships and your influence and impact are undeniable, and so is the resume. I know you don't like this question, but when it's all said and done, if people kind of get in a circle and nod their head and say, that's Saban. Nobody ever did the job of coaching college football better than him. You wouldn't mind hearing that, would you?
Well, I think it would be a real tribute, though, not just to me, but, we've had a lot of tremendous players. We've had a lot of really, really good coaches. And, all those people who have supported and helped this program be successful all deserve, a part of that accolade that you just presented. And, there's a certain amount of pride for me personally to be involved with all that. But at the same time, I think a lot of people deserve a lot of credit for it.
And so does, you've had a tremendous life partner. You've said before that Terry has been a tremendous asset to every sort of organization that you've been a part of, including Nick's Kids, your charitable organization. Is there a story that you could share where she really made an enormous difference in particular to your collective quest?
Well, I think once early on, I mean, I could tell some funny stories, but this is probably one of the most significant, at least to me, because I think it helped me tremendously, is when I first started being a head coach, I was viewed sort of a little bit like the Till of the Hun by the media. And it really upset me. And I would come home and I would say, man, Terry, I mean, the way these people talk about me, I don't feel like that's the kind of person I am at all. And she said, well, did you ever watch yourself? She says, you're nervous, you're anxious, you're curt. You're not respectful of some of their questions. So why would they see you any other way? And, I said, oh, I'm not really like that. And she said, yes, you are. She said, how you're perceived, how you think of yourself and how other people perceive you is your blind spot. And yours is big as the Grand Canyon. So I finally
She's the only one that can say that to you, by the way.
I finally did take her advice. All right. And, I started being a little more positive, less anxious, more sharing in a lot of ways. And, gradually, I think, some of that sort of image, started to diminish a little bit. And I have some great relationships with a lot of people in the press, like yourself, a lot of people at ESPN, a lot of other places. But, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate what the media does, for our game, our players, the interest they create, the self-gratification a lot of players get from some of the things that they're awarded from your comments. So, I would say that was one thing from a public relations standpoint that was huge, in changing, who I am as a coach.
Sometimes loving spouses can't resist saying, see, I told you so. I was right. she indulged herself in that.
I've heard that one more than once.
Well, one of the fun rituals, I think, that shows a side of you and maybe Terry as well that people might not expect is the ritual that you have when you guys get in the car, whether it's a home game, leaving Bryant-Denny or coming back from the plane in a road game, when you get in the car home and there's a certain song that is cranked up on the radio. And I don't think it's a particularly celebratory song, but it's an interesting choice. And tell folks about that. It's the news is good if you're playing this certain song on the ride home, right?
Yeah, well, it's Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones. And don't ask me why, because I've listened to that song a lot and I still don't know what the message is. I don't really know what it means, all right, in a way. But I think it's just the beat. I think it's just the rock. It's just, we grew up, people don't know this, but, when we were in high school, we could go to the movie theater, and on every other Saturday night, they'd take the fire trucks out of Pleasant Valley Volunteer Fire Department, put a record machine in there, and that's where we'd have a dance. And so Terry and I used to always go to the dance. So we both really like music, and we listen to music a lot. And probably one of my favorite experiences that we had a couple of years ago, we saw the Rolling Stones in Atlanta, and it was a great show, and have a lot of appreciation for, really good music. The Eagles are one of my favorites. I think everybody knows that as well. But so that's just one of our theme songs. I mean, and it's like, it's not that we do it because we like the song. It's a tradition.
Understand.
And our superstition as coaches says, okay, we got to play this song again, which is a good thing.
Rituals and traditions and superstitions are all important. Even though it is kind of an angry song, you guys use it as a celebration, and that's all that matters. Is you have a personal ritual. That's a great place to leave it. Really appreciate your time and sharing some wisdom and different sides. And folks, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was entertaining and illuminating. And again, Nick and I both want to say one more time, keep up the great work in Houston and Texas Children's Hospital.
Well, there's no question about that, Chris. I'd like to add to that I think I want all the people out there, whether they're donors, doctors, nurses, staff, we appreciate you more than you know, all right, for what you're doing to help young people.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Nick. And we'll see you next time, folks.
Thank you.